What's up, everybody? So one of the most common issues that I see people having is overstriding and acceleration. So when we talk about overstriding, usually what we're talking about is that we're contacting too far out in front of the body and we're trying to pull ourselves across the track as opposed to striking in the right spot so we can launch ourselves off the ground into the next stride. Coming out of the blocks, it's pretty common to see that people push out, reach out in front of them, and try to pull themselves across the ground. Now, there's a few issues with that. For one, it's a mechanically disadvantageous way to move. We're not going to run our fastest if we're trying to pull ourselves across the ground. Second, when we reach out in front of the body, we'll typically crash, brake, and then we'll have excessive braking forces we have to deal with, when really during acceleration it should be predominantly just propulsive forces. When we reach max velocity, braking forces and propulsive forces equal out, which is why you reach maximal velocity and you can't run any faster. But when we're accelerating, the propulsive forces we produce need to overcome any braking forces. And if we can get our strike into the ground in the right spot at the right time and in the right direction, then we're going to have a better ratio of propulsive versus braking forces, and that's going to allow us to accelerate. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have to put our foot down at the right spot. So in the first step or two, it should be under or behind the hips. Then as we rise, it'll move a little bit forward, and then eventually when we're in upright sprinting, we'll be contacting just under or just in front of the chest. But for acceleration, we need to be aiming under the hips or behind the hips, especially in the first few steps. But sometimes simply aiming for that spot doesn't work. You might struggle with getting the foot in the right spot, or you might hit too far behind and then you don't really go anywhere, or you hit too far in front even though you're trying to aim behind yourself. So even though it could be as simple as trying to aim for a better spot on the ground when you're sprinting, it's not always going to work. So the best cue that I've found to work for minimizing any kind of overstriding during acceleration is that when you drive your knee, you want to feel the bend in your knee like you're bringing your calf to your hamstring, and that when you're launching out of the blocks, the first thing you're going to feel is driving the knee up but not letting the foot swing out in front of you. I think a lot of the times when we see issues of overstriding, the real cause of it is that as we drive our knee and we come out of the blocks or out of the first couple steps, is that we're letting the foot swing open, and it's going to take time and space for that leg to close back up to hit the ground in the right spot. So if we can eliminate that opening of the knee in the first couple steps, keep the knee pretty acute when we drive it up and forward, that will allow us to strike back in the right spot. So let's try it out, see how it feels, and go from there. Now, before we get in the blocks and demonstrate it in a sprint, I want to show you a little bit more of what I mean. So oftentimes when we say we're launching out of the blocks, oftentimes what will happen is we'll drive our knee up, but we'll let that foot come out in front, and then when we go to strike down, we're striking way in front of our hips, right? Whereas if coming out of the blocks on that first push, we drive our knee up and keep it sort of acute like this, and you aim for that feeling of having this position at the knee, that's going to allow us to strike back and launch ourselves in the right direction. All right, so at the beginning of the session, I did a couple starts just with no cues, just kind of going with my normal technique, and I did have a little bit of overstriding going on, and I ran about 190 to the 10 meters. Then when I introduced the cue of keeping the knee closed and just kind of driving the knee with that calf to hamstring type of feeling, not letting the foot swing open or letting the knee swing open when you drive the knee forward in those first few steps at least, then I went down to a 183. So from 190 to 183, that's 0.07. That's almost a tenth of a second. This may not work for everybody, but I think it's a good cue for most people to try because it's really simple. You don't have to think about anything complex. You just drive the knee and try to keep that knee angle closed, and then your leg will come back down to the track on its own. You're not going to have to think about it or anything like that. So a cue like this, just drive the knee and keep it closed, or calf to hamstring when you drive the knee. I think it's a good simple way to teach acceleration, especially early acceleration. Now, as you continue to accelerate through 20, 30, and 40, you're going to continue to rise, and yeah, where you strike on the ground is going to change. But you don't really have to think about it. If you get the first few steps right, usually the rest of the race will set itself up pretty well. But if you get the first few steps wrong, you're going to be in a weird position. It's going to be hard to come out of that, and you're probably not going to be able to execute the best race possible. So remember, when you're coming out of the blocks, you really want to keep the knee closed, drive the knee up, keep the knee angle closed, and then just let that leg attack back at the track. And if you do that, you're going to accelerate well, have a good start. And if you have a good start, you'll probably have a good race.